So, preamble topic that's not about drugs.
So boring.
So, guys, I really, I really enjoyed last month's episode of Game Club. So I actually watched it in full.
I don't believe you.
I know.
I do believe you because you came up to me and said, "Why'd you make fun of me?"
Yeah. So
Did
that was maybe my one critique about it is that you guys talk a lot of shit about a guy that's not there.
I don't recall doing that.
I don't recall doing that.
I believe Nick's exact words were, "Man, it's a good thing Hans isn't here. Long words confuse him."
Yeah, I do remember saying something like that.
Okay,
Yes.
I remember that.
Oh no, Nick, that's word for word.
Yeah.
That is a quote. I haven't written down.
Yeah, I have written down.
Future
here's the
Nick, put a flashback.
So here's the preamble topic for you dicks. I'm going to say long words, and you just have to tell me what they mean.
Okay.
All right, okay.
Have you actually prepared this?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Wow,
'Cause
you are so salty. Jeez.
fuck you guys.
Hey, you know what? I respect it.
I respect the pettiness.
For such a throwaway comment that was made in like, what was it when you said the topics and I said I don't know what that means, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was. Yeah. 'Cause
such a throwaway line.
I think it was also the word ambitious that I think that we were mentioning.
Yeah. Because apparently me no talk good. Right.
But wait, no.
What?
I don't-
Nick?
wait.
Defend yourself. Go on. What?
How did it come up? Because
I don't know.
don't think I would say that unprovoked.
No, because you. Yeah. So I said I don't know what that means as a joke, and you said that's a really good Hans impression because he would know what I mean.
Yeah, because
Fair.
you're assholes. Yeah.
Hey,
So
I don't know why you're throwing me and IY into this. Nick said it, not us.
you just didn't defend me. You could have been like, "Oh no, that was a bit.
Oh,
That's
no,
a bit mean."
Here's a list of all the long words Hans knows. Let me
Yeah.
just.
Just pulls out a sheet of paper with all these words on it.
What was it you said the other night? 25 years we've known each other. All right, you should know how smart I am. So now you just have to suffer with a
You should
crappy
know how smart
preamble.
Hans is.
So
All right, Hans.
are you ready?
Hey Hans, there's book smart and street smart, and I don't know either of you. So
Fuck you, Alex. So, your first word. Paw.
all right.
Imagine
So-
if that was the joke. Imagine if I did this entire setup just for this one joke.
I hope you know, Hans. And that's where I'm cutting the preamble. Brothers and sisters, welcome to the Not So Super Bash Bros presents Game Club for September 2021. Yes, Game Club is back, the monthly video podcast review thing, where we take turns picking games, go play them for the month, come back and discuss them for your listening pleasure. This month, Alex picked Death's Door from Acid Nerve, and as ever, I am your host, Death Incarnate, Nick Davis, joined by Baldness Incarnate, Hans Davis.
What about you're bullying me again already?
Hairiness Incarnate, Alex Proudfoot.
Hello. I'm not offended with that. Just throwing it out there.
Chef Incarnate, IY Chung.
We're just dealing with it, Hans.
Hi, is everyone? What's up? Hans, welcome back.
It's good to be back. Well, no, it's not good to be back.
Hey man, if you thought it was bad, with 1 month you were gone, could you imagine 2 months with you gone? Nick could have made 2 separate comments about you.
Yeah,
Could have had more preamble topics.
and that would have been 20 minutes of preamble topic. I feel refreshed. I'm hungry to review this game.
Yes, Death's Door, the isometric action-adventure game, originally released on PC, Xbox One, and the Xbox Series X and S in July 2021. Mr. Proudfoot,
Hello.
why have you selected Death's Door? Or why did you select Death's Door?
If you recall, Nick, I gave you the choice, and you picked Death's Door. So
I technically did, yes.
So, Nick, why did you pick Death's Door?
You give me two vague descriptions of games.
I love how you've turned it back on. I'm like, why did you pick it?
Okay, why was Death's Door one of your potential options for Game Club?
I saw clips of it, and I thought, you know what, that kind of looks interesting. So I picked it.
Alright, fair enough. It's simple. I like it.
But as I said, you actually picked it.
I did, yes. What was the other option? Was Bastion, wasn't
Bastion, yeah.
it? Yeah.
Oh, does that mean Alex is picking the 2-month game then?
No.
If you pick this one?
No. I actually haven't picked already.
We need to address the rule book here.
The Game Club rulebook.
Yeah, do you still have a copy?
No. As ever, I've split this into 3 categories.
Oh, you ready? Nick, what are the categories?
Gameplay,
Hell yeah.
Yeah, baby!
characters and style,
Oh, yeah.
and what does an indie game need to do to stand out these days?
I don't even know.
Fair, okay. But before we get into our first category, I have to ask, as ever, how far did everyone get in Death's Door? I finished the game, did not do much of the side stuff, or didn't do much tracking to like get extra things. I kind of just got from beginning to end and was very happy with my time, the time I spent with it. Alex.
I got the true ending and 100%ed it.
Oh, why?
I just finished the base game. Did not get the true ending.
Hans.
I
don't know why I went in this order. This is not the order we usually go.
His hands is gone.
I beat the Frog King, and that was really it.
The Frog.
The Frog King, and that was really it.
So, gameplay. I think the best way to kind of talk about the combat in Death's Door is probably to kind of say it's basically like an isometric hack and slash game with some, and then you add into that some like light Zelda dungeoning and some Metroidvania elements to kind of throw into the mix. And as a whole, I think it's fine. I think it starts very, very very slowly, and I think the first like couple of hours of the whole game are very, very like boring almost. But I do think it definitely ramps up, and it does, as it adds more elements to the combat and the different mechanics to solve puzzles. I definitely think it does start getting somewhere towards the end, but I definitely think it starts so slowly. And there was almost a point towards the start of that game where I stopped playing it and completely forgot about it, and was almost at a point where I wasn't going to go back because I just felt so unenamored with what I had played so far. I'd like to get your guys' thoughts on kind of just like the general gameplay side of things.
Yeah, that was kind of my take on it too, was that it was fine. I really enjoyed the boss fights. Like, I thought the boss fights were fantastic, but kind of getting to the boss fights and everything in between them was fine, raging to boring for me. But dude, those boss fights are great.
Alex, Tawa, any input?
Go ahead, Alex.
I thought in between boss fights, I'm on the same boat as Sans. Like, there are parts of it where it's fine, and then it's just like you get the feeling that they've just thrown in like waves to fluff out the gameplay of that section. Mm-hmm. It's like the gates drop down. You need to defeat like a couple of waves of monsters before the gates open, and you can continue on through. I just felt like it was putting that there to make that area seem longer than it was. Mm-hmm. So bit unnecessary fluff in some areas.
Me and you really agreed on that, actually. Like, the
Yeah.
wave sections, there just seems to be way too many of them.
Yeah,
and to put
they
in.
like lent into that way too often.
You raised a really good point as well about, like, say, me and Alex discussed it on the drive to Danny's, but, like, the chests, for example, when you gain your powers, and for no reason, they just throw in a wave battle every time you have to get a new power, but it doesn't tie in to the power at all that you're getting. And Alex were like, would it not be better if, like, you were given, like, whenever you go into the chest, like, okay, yeah, if you want to make it a wave battle, fine, but let it be, about the new power that you're getting, so you can play around and be like, oh, this is how you use it in a fight, or this is how you use it to solve puzzles, not just have a random wave fight before you get your power.
So
Good luck.
I asked Hans, and he didn't do it. Did either of you upgrade your spells?
A
I only
couple
got
of them.
one
Yeah.
of them.
So I think they should have been swapped. So you fight the boss, like the mini boss, to unlock the spell, because the boss incorporates the spell into his attacks. I think that would have been a cooler way to unlock the spell than just fighting like waves of enemies.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Because you're right. Those boss fights where like you're attacking the guy or where you're beating the guardian of the spell to upgrade it. I actually think those are as good as the actual boss fights in terms of just like what they want you to do and the way you have to approach the combat encounter. And I think they are far better than like any of the other combat encounters in the game, which they definitely throw at you far too often, of just here's wave after wave of enemies that isn't a challenge necessarily. It's just like the challenge is more endurance rather than actual skill.
I'm quite shocked you guys are praising the boss fight so much. To be honest,
Really?
I think they are fine, like at best. And I guess probably like regular gameplay before the bosses. Like I think I agree with Nick whenever he says like the combat is fine. And I think a big issue with, because I think that that's a great idea you guys have said. It's like, oh, you should like use the spell to actually earn the spell or whatever, right? Or fight a boss that uses it, right? That makes sense. But like, you can't have a combat section that uses the spell, because the issue is that the combat doesn't lend itself to it, because all the enemies are kind of like plain. Like, and the thing is, like, you can use, like, none of the spells are like necessary, like at all. Like, I think the only real gimmick is, and that's not even true of the enemies. Like, there's a bit where you can use bombs to blow up platforms, which Nick told me about. And that's the only like real like utility I find. But everything else is just like,
I don't know, the hook shot. I definitely used the hook shot a lot in combat,
but what did you use it for though?
just to get the enemies faster.
See, like for me, that's like that doesn't. But you didn't have to use that, right? Like,
No, I did.
what I'm saying is like,
but like compared to the other spells, like which I never used in combat, at least I actually had the thought of, oh, I should use this. Like it definitely felt like it fit into combat encounters more than the other spells.
yeah. So this is the thing, right? I would say is that the hook is the one thing, and this is my issue with like the game in general, which I'll get onto later. But like my issue with the game is that I never felt like I did anything cool in that game, right? Like, we'll get onto, I'm sure, puzzles later. But like in combat, it's like, tell me one moment where like you did something cool
Yeah.
in that game. Whenever it comes to that game, like this kind of like hack and slashy thing, it's like, you would expect to be able to say, oh, I dodged this move and then I combined these attacks and like all these explosions happen or whatever. But like, it doesn't really happen in this game. And for me, like, now I compare this game a lot to like a 2D Zelda game in terms of like combat. But you'll have to correct me, Nick, right? Because I don't really play Zelda as much as you. But like in Zelda, your gadgets do actually do stuff, right? You do use them for specific enemies. Like if an enemy's flying, right, you have to pull out your bow, right? Like that's just how it is, right?
Yeah, things like that. Like if it's flying enemy, like you can use hook shot to like pull away their shield and leave them vulnerable, things like that.
Cool stuff like that, right? But like in this game, it's like, well, here's this new spell, but it doesn't do anything really.
Yeah, like you're never incentivized to use the new stuff you're getting.
Do you know what I think perfectly personifies the fact that like the combat is so one note? Is that your tactic for shield enemies is to just attack the
Hit their
shield until it's destroyed.
Yeah.
Like that perfectly personifies the combat in this game. It's like, oh, do you have to dodge behind it? No, I just have to attack his shield until it goes away and then attack some more. All right then.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's those major themes. Like, variety is not there, which is a real shame. And you guys were saying about like essentially like the chest sequences. One thing I really disliked about it, I understand what they're going for. I get it. You're in a dark room and all you have is the light of the keyhole. That looks cool, right? I'll give you that. But the fact that enemies can move outside the edge of the screen, I had issues where mages would like be off the screen. Yeah. Which, like, it's not the biggest deal. Like, it's really not. But, like, at the same time, it's like, it's that kind of polish that's not there for the game. Yeah, and actually, I believe my first reaction whenever you get the fireball spell is like, oh, I thought there were things to light up. I thought it would be like that kind of thing. But, yeah, like, the combat's just very drab. And is one of the reasons why I stopped playing for a while as well.
Yeah, it is definitely a low point of this game. Like, I do think of all the aspects I could like split this into, it is definitely the part I would rank at the bottom probably of just in terms of these just general combat encounters. But you did mention you have a very
different take on boss fights.
On the boss fight. So
right, let's.
I don't know if you guys
fight you about this.
All right, so I don't know if you guys actually
Mister, I did 2 bosses.
Yeah,
hey,
they were great.
He did 3.
Yeah,
you technically
4 of you include the tutorial.
Yeah. So I don't know if you guys know like what this studio did before. Do you?
Oh, what do you call it?
Death Door. So they did Titan Souls. Yeah. So that was very much a game that was literally just boss fights.
Oh, like it was, yeah. Now you're talking.
Like, so Titan Souls is literally like similar actually to this, where like you killed a boss and it opened the next door to like the next area, but only in Titan Souls it just opened like, here are more bosses for you to fight. And its combat was a lot more, obviously it wasn't hack and slash type thing, it was very actually like precise in terms of you had a bow and arrow and you just shot the bow and you only had 1 arrow, so you had to like retract it back to you and things like that. But I think part of that is why I think I really enjoyed the boss fights in this, because when the bit of Titan Souls I have played, it's very fun and the boss fights are very well designed, and I think this has carried over to this. Like, I especially think like in terms of a last boss fight bringing a whole game together, I actually think this is one of the best examples of this, because the last boss fight, it like leans on mechanics from other boss fights. It even leans into some of the puzzle and traversal aspects of the game. I think that does a very good job. So overall, I had a very positive impression of the boss fights, and I assume Hans and Alex, judging by your reaction here, you also had quite a positive impression of the boss fights.
Oh yeah, like for me, I think my love for the boss fights is probably a bit different. Just because, to me, it was a nostalgia trip for the boss fights, because they were literally kind of that very old school Legend of Zelda boss fights where you had to learn the patterns and when to attack, and not only that, but when you learn the patterns, there's then the next stage, which is similar patterns, but they're just more difficult, and having to learn that. Like, and I felt they for me anyway, they were that perfect balance of kind of challenging, but definitely not unfair. And like anytime I did die, I definitely felt like that was my fault. It wasn't like that was cheap or anything. It was like definitely like, nah, that was my fault. I rolled too soon. I didn't pay attention to the balls coming towards my face. I was surprised with how much I enjoyed the boss fights in this. I didn't get as far as I know Alex was telling me about the final boss, and it sounds fantastic, and it sounds like what a final boss fight should be, which is like using all the knowledge you've gained in the game so far, and then showing that you've learned all these things to use that to face the boss. But even the 4 that I did were just, I was surprised by how much I really enjoyed them.
Alex, did you tend to agree with all that? Yeah.
Yeah, the only issue I have with the boss fights is I think the frog and the witch should have been swapped because I think the frog is the easier one. So I think the frog should have went first and then the witch.
I tend to agree with that, yeah.
Outside of that, I thought the boss fights were like fun. And I think the last boss is incredible and how it ties the game up, visiting all the zones again. It's just really well done.
Yeah. So IY.
Yeah.
Counterpoint us.
Okay.
Shit
right.
in our teapot.
Yell objection and tell us what's up.
All right. So, disclaimer. At a glance, right, without thinking too much about it, I think the witch might have been the best boss, right? Which is going to sound kind of weird. And that is because it is the only boss, to my knowledge, that has even the slightest bit of, like, randomness to it. Because every other boss, usually in games it's like, okay, the boss has this number of patterns, but at least like they tend to like mix up the order of the pattern. But from what I remember, the bosses do the same stuff, like from start to finish. And the witch, however, does throw different colored jars. So at least that's like a bit of like, oh, I need to think on my feet a little bit. But like, you know, just like doing like, say, like the frog boss, right? Going through those two phases over and over again. And as Hans said, you know, it's like a Zelda game, right? But the thing is, in a Zelda game, what usually happens is you get some gadget and you spam the shit out of that gadget in that respective dungeon, right? Against that boss. But like in this game, it's all the same. Like, wouldn't it have been sick if I was like grappling hooking to these different points to like chase after like the boss where like you get after you get the grappling hook, or like you have to light up some stuff after you get the fireball. We have to blow up some stuff like in the middle of the boss fight. Like there's none of that is the thing, and I just think there's just so many missed opportunities in these boss fights. Also, the last boss fight, I think the traversal part is fine. Because I think that's like different, but like all the other stuff, it's, I don't know. I like on one hand you can say, oh, it's like really cool seeing all these things come back together, but for me it's like, wait, there was only like 3 main bosses in this game, or 3 main bosses before this for all the dungeons, and you're already rehashing those moves. So for me it's like, is that good? Like, the setting's fine and all, and like, you know, the whole idea of it is fine, but like, I don't know. I wanted like more uniqueness, and that's like my main critique of this whole game is like it feels like the game is like the minimum.
I feel like you say, like, you know, it's rehashing like old move sets and stuff, but the flip side of that is it's challenging you to remember patterns. Like, you know, like you're saying it's rehashing it, but I feel it as like I said, like you've gained this much. Like a boss fight should be you using the knowledge you've gained thus far to then go forth and beat the boss. I feel like that's the way I view it. Is can you remember how you beat the witch? Can you remember how you beat the Frog King, the Frog King? Like that's the way I view it. Maybe I'm just an eternal optimist, but
now that I think about it, on the last boss, is any of the Frog King's abilities in it?
No.
Because his whole gimmick is that the floor breaks, right?
Yeah.
But like, there's none of that.
I know.
They replaced it with like the jumping.
Yeah,
lines,
with the jumping. Yeah, I don't know where that came from. To be honest, it's kind of
which to be fair is new, is different, and it's like, oh shit, that's a different thing. And I think that's great. And yeah, I quite like bosses that do this, where it's like they repeat everything, and at the very end, it's like they have their own moveset. But this one, it was, I guess he has the big laser beam, right? I guess.
And he summons the bulls.
Yeah, he summons the doors, right? Yeah, I guess, right? Like, to be fair, like, that is a good point. But yeah, I don't know. It's
because I that's what I kind of like about the design of that last boss fight is it builds up. Is like, yeah, the first phase is him just doing the witch's moveset. The second stage, not doing the frog's moveset, but it's still just doing that. It's just doing that singular move. And it's learning that pattern. And then the next boss fight, yeah, he's doing Betty's moveset. And then the final phase is it brings it all together and then adds zone moves into it. And, like, that feels like a really good natural progression, and the fact that it ties back to the themes of the, like, even just the whole theme of the game, because the idea is, like, he's been keeping these people alive for so long because he's got rid of death in the land. It would make sense that he, and, like, the witch hints that she has made a deal with this guy, so it would make sense that he has some of that power. So it does, I think, it's not, I will say, yes, I think it does seem, especially for such a short game, it feels a bit rehashy, but I think because they tie it so well thematically together, I think it pays off.
Like, yeah, I think thematically it's fine. It's just because the combat is so dry throughout the whole game. It's like repeating that again for me is just like, we're doing this again, are we? Because as you know, right, I think the most fun I had was like making my own fun, where it was like, you know, I set myself the challenge of I will beat
each boss with the weapon you find.
Yeah, I had to use the fucking umbrella against the crow, which took forever. That weird hitbox, but like at least that was like something, right? And like, yeah, and that was the other thing I think we haven't talked about, but like the weapons in the game.
Yeah.
Maybe some pro player wants to tell me otherwise, but like,
So actually, Alex, as someone who obviously beat
as
the
a
game
pro
and
player,
100
Alex, as a pro player,
as you 100% of the game,
Yeah.
did you alternate changing the, like,
Yes.
did you use different weapons, or
Yes.
did you just
I
stick to
swapped.
one?
I swapped between the normal sword, the daggers, and the great sword.
For any particular reason, or just because you liked them?
Depend on the enemy. If they were a big slow enemy, the dagger, so I could get more hits in. If they were like a small slow
I'm
enemy,
I'm pretty sure the umbrella is the fastest weapon.
no, it's not.
it's not.
I'm pretty sure
It-
it's the
it has
fastest.
the
It
same
doesn't have the most swings.
It has
It's
the
the
same
same as the sword.
speed
Same
as the
sword.
sword.
Okay.
It just
It's literally
does
the
half
same as the
damage.
sword, except it does half damage. Yeah. That's why the bird took so freaking long.
Yeah, there is an
Yes, I'm
achievement.
aware. I watched you do the bird with the umbrella.
There is an achievement for beating the game with the umbrella,
Yeah.
since it's the first weapon you can find. But yeah, I like the daggers. I like the great sword. I wasn't a fan of the hammer. I did use it for a bit, but it just felt I like the AoE is pretty cool. But
I think my issue with the weapons in the game is that so the only the only big difference in terms of using combat is like the speed of the swing, right? I can argue range as well a bit, but like it doesn't really
and
matter.
the combo.
No. See, this is the thing, right? Is I don't think that actually matters because
Yeah, because every weapon still just swings.
yeah, no, because what I find is that the enemies have some of the enemies have like really fast, like unreactable attacks. Like you know the guy with like the spear that does like the swing, like the single swing. Like that there like swings so fast, as well as even like say you know like the boss's backhand at the last boss, like that shit is like so fast that again the game is just patterns, right? You just learn the patterns, and so what I find right was and maybe this is different if you max out attack speed, right? But like what I find was there was a big difference between getting 2 hits with one weapon or essentially only one with another harder hitting weapon. Like, it was never worth using... Not always, right? But, like, it never felt worth using, like, the heavier weapons because you couldn't physically get enough swings in. And because you can't cancel your attack with a roll, because Bungie was asking me, like, can you do that? And I just started swinging and then rolling, and, like, you can't do that. It makes it... I don't know, it just makes the like, the numbers kind of odd, in my opinion. Like, I think it's great, though, that, like, you can use any weapon. Like, I think that's a really great thing. But, like, the issue I found was that the weapons were arguably kind of similar because they don't have any, like, effects or, like, cool charge moves or anything. They're just kind of...
Hey, the hammer has an effect.
It does, yeah. It has, like, a little chain lightning thing. But, like... And that's cool, actually. But, like, what else does anything have? Right? Like...
Yeah, the only difference is like damage numbers, attack speed, combo, and reach.
Yeah. Yeah, it's...
But
again,
like that was my issue with the different weapons is because they all felt so similar. I was always going to stick with the one that I've been using the longest, which was the sword. Like I never felt the urge to swap to a different one because it just felt like playing the exact same way, but with a slight modifier on it. So the sword felt like the baseline, which then I'm like, all right, of course I'll use the baseline.
Do you know how you be? Oh, go on.
Towards the end of the game, I just stopped using the sword and I would just alternate between the great sword and the daggers.
See, that's losing frames, entering that menu, changing weapons. Can't be doing that.
Well, I mean, I would obviously do it before the fight. I wouldn't do it mid-fight. I would see the enemy and go, right, this is the weapon I'll use.
Think you never used the umbrella? What the fuck, man? Not a pro like I was. That's all I hear.
Why would I put myself through that? I didn't max out spell damage.
Neither did I was.
Did I?
I don't think I put points into anything apart from movement speed.
Oh, really? Wow.
That was like, I saw each weapon in its purest form. Like,
watching him play that game was infuriating at times.
I had maxed out damage and attack speed.
Like by the end of the game, I think I had most attack. Oh no, I had maxed attack and max speed.
I didn't think you'd maxed
maxed
attack by the end.
Yeah, because I had a couple of points. Oh, maybe, you might be right.
Watching RY play the game was the most infuriating thing I've ever done, I think. Especially when he was fighting the old crow with the umbrella.
It was pretty rough. But you know what? It made me such a great player whenever I swapped back. Because I've had a few attempts at the last boss with the umbrella, and like the problem wasn't like losing. The problem was it took so long to get to the same point that I just swapped to the sword. And you know what? Fucking so fast. So fast. It was so good. I suppose
that's what happens when you do twice the damage.
Yeah, like, makes you a better player, keeps you concentrated for twice the time. I don't know, but yeah, like, I think I just find the weapons and, like, the spells to be kind of whatever.
Yeah. They're not great. Like, I don't think they are.
They're not super deep.
No,
I would say, though, I feel like the spell upgrade thing sounds, like, real cool. And, like, as a really cool reward to give to a player.
My issue with that is for me anyway, you saw the best one. And that was the attack during the hook shot.
I don't think that's the best one.
I feel like it's not
the best one. What do you think is the best one?
I feel like it's the coolest one.
Yeah, it's the coolest one, but it's not the best one.
What do you think is the best one?
The dot from the fireball.
The problem is, like, that is the issue. I think it goes back to, it never felt natural using the spells in combat apart from the hook shot. For me personally, anyway, like I never felt like, oh, this is a good time to sit here and charge up a fireball. So I never felt like I got to the reward out of getting that burning off the fireball because I never felt, oh shit, I should use it.
That is one issue I do have with the spells in the game is why is the 3 out of 4 of them are like charged?
Yeah,
it feels really clunky.
Like if I could just fire off a fireball, I would have used it way more. But yeah, it was the fact. That's what made it feel like it was never a natural part of the combat for me, was having to sit there and charge it. In a game where I feel like you should probably be moving like 90% of the time if you're not swinging like your weapon, then standing and charging seems like a bad idea.
Yeah, also and like I said at the start of the game, it's not cool, right?
Yeah.
Like, to just stand still, I'm gonna charge my thing, it's like,
unless you're yelling Kamehameha while you charge up something, it's not cool.
Yeah. At least the bomb one. At least that was like, there was a satisfying end to it.
So, the final bit of the gameplay side of things, I think, is like the puzzle and traversal stuff, which I actually think is even more of a slow burn than some of the combat, to be honest, because I think the puzzles for, I think, maybe the first 2/3 of this game are flat out bad. And, like, calling them puzzles is probably doing them too much justice. Like, the early puzzles in the game, when you get, like, the fireball spell, and even before that, when it's just the bow and arrow, is can you line up your spell to hit one fire into the next one? And it's really, really fucking boring. I only think the puzzles get, like, actually fun to do and execute when they introduce, like, the laser ones towards the end when you get the grappling hook, or even, I think it's slightly before you get the grappling hook, because it's actually adding some form of
urgency.
Yes, like, yeah, the solution may be obvious to what you need to do, but then the actual fun of the puzzle is the execution of it, because that's not just super straightforward like it was with the earlier ones. And yeah, I think calling them puzzles early on, or even having them as things you need to do, is overselling what you have to do to solve them because they are so straightforward. Like, you want to say, like, the wave-based combat bits are, like, time padding. I think some of the early, like, fire this arrow through the flame and into the next lantern is more time padding than those. Because it is so obvious on what you need to do. And, like, how it's not difficult what you need to do.
Can I praise one puzzle?
Go for it.
The bathroom floor.
Yes, it's class.
That was genius.
And it
They only ever do it once. But
comes
why
up
do they
again.
only ever do it once?
Yeah, no.
Also, there's no context for it either, right?
Yeah, there's like no, like, it's not, there's no hint about what it is. It's just, oh, I've noticed something.
Yeah. I have to say, some of the puzzles for, like, the shrines may be the best puzzles in the game. Because there's one at the end of the game where you need to traverse an icy path.
Yeah.
And it is a goddamn nightmare.
Yeah, I think I did that one. But again, like, that is towards the tail end of the game, and it's when they introduced the hook shot, which I feel like is the only, like, that's the only bit where, like, the only spell they really thought of, how can we make an engaging puzzle with this? Like, so many of the other puzzles are just, can you stand in the right spot and cast a spell? Which isn't a puzzle, it's because it's always so fucking obvious as well.
Yeah.
It's just, it was really frustrating because it just felt like it wasn't gameplay, so to speak. It was just, we need something so you're not just walking straight through this room. It was just, it was one of the things, especially, like, tied with the combat, that made me really want to put this game down early on, of just, like, I feel like it was almost insulting my intelligence by saying, oh, what are you going to do? How are you going to solve this? It's like, I stand here, I fire an arrow, literally in a straight line. It's just, it was so, it almost felt like pandering, or like patronizing, sorry, of just like, oh, can you do it? Really wound me up.
For me, it's more just the limitation of your spells. Like, because you're making puzzles around it, right? So it's, and like, all three of them are projectile things. Or all four of them, actually, are projectile things. And so it's like, what kind of puzzles can you make with these? That only use that item, that is. Which is what I'm, like, more bothered about. Like, at the end of the day, I think, yeah, the puzzles weren't super engaging, but it's fine. Like, it is what it is. Yeah, I don't really have too much to say about it. They're not great, but I think it's more just the tools you have rather than. Yeah, actually, I think that's the thing. Right? It feels like the spells came first before the puzzles.
Yeah,
is what it feels like.
It almost, like, it feels like they designed, like, the spells and were like, all right, here's how they're going to be. How do we design puzzles around them? And then didn't think of, oh, can we design more interesting puzzles by changing how some of the spells work? Feels like they were dead set as like, all right, the spells are going to work this way, and the puzzles are going to have to shape around that rather than them working in tandem. Is there any final gameplay thoughts before we move on?
Oh, we didn't talk about, like, the traversing stuff. Just, like, general. Because let me tell you, I got a big complaint.
Oh, go for it. What's your complaint about your traversal?
No freaking map.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's just the no map thing. Like,
Now, so that was my biggest complaint about the game. I hated the fact there's no map, because for the true ending, you need to find every seed, plant every seed, and in the graveyard you need to guide doorkeepers' ghosts to the statues. And finding those statues was horrible. A map would have been real useful.
But it's really weird as well. Like, in a game that's so heavily inspired by old school Zelda, why could it not be a case of, you have to, maybe you're not just given the map like it's a GI feature, but you could maybe find a map which then would unveil the area, something like that.
Yeah, it was pretty awful, because I did take a break from the game for like a week or two, a week and a half.
Yeah.
And I went back into the game, and I'm pretty sure that bit you told me about, where like you're sliding along the ice and have to like hit all the switches, I assume, is the one you're talking about.
Yeah.
So yeah, I accidentally went there, because I didn't know where I was going after I came back to the game, and I was like, oh, well, this seemed, I don't think I've seen this bit. And then I went there, I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. And there's like dead end. It's like, oh, I did this for a health thing. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
shrine, yeah.
Which, to be fair, was the last one I needed for my health up. But yeah, it was like it's like that's the thing the issue I have with like the dungeons is that I'm curious to hear your guys' opinions on how well the like backtracking stuff is, because there's so much of it. Like, I can't tell if it's either so well crafted that they have shortcuts everywhere, or it's so not well crafted because they have to have shortcuts everywhere. I'm not sure.
I wouldn't even say it's define shortcut.
Do you know whenever you open up, like you reach the end of an area and then like it takes you?
Yeah, it's like a straight
to, like, the
path,
hub.
basically.
Oh,
Yeah. Because like, a lot of the game is a lot of like reach the end here and then get back there, which opens up another door. So you go to the end there, then you come back, which I don't think is a very interesting progression.
the only real backtracking I did was, I think it was just before I went to the final. I think it was just actually before I handed in the final soul to the old crow. Like, I went essentially just reran up to the start of the manor again, just being like, all right, what can I do now that I have like the hook shot and I have the bombs. And like that was pretty much the only backtracking I did, but I just ran back through it like I was going through it for the first time, but just going to all the bits I couldn't go to before.
Oh, I was just referring to like generally like the first time you're in a dungeon, like the way you come circling back each time.
I thought it was fine.
Yeah, like it's so weird like picking up a key and like not having a map to look at and be like, oh, I haven't been here, right?
Yeah.
And like
I feel like it's not it's for the manor. I think it's fine because you generally only really have one way you can go in the manor.
correct.
Because you're kind of unlocking it like wing by wing as you pick up the keys in each. Like, there's only one wing open at the start, and you find a key, and then you can kind of choose which door you want to open. But then you'll just find another key in there, and you can open the other one. I feel like it becomes more of a. It was a bit more confusing with the second dungeon.
Like the frog ruin one.
Yeah, the frog one, because
that was
it
the
definitely
first time.
like laps over itself, and like there's different like heights of different areas that kind of loop through each other. Where and because there's no like one set path through it, it definitely feels a lot more confusing, and like a map probably would do wonders for that area.
Yeah, like I left out. I could not find my last soul because it was like at the south part of this map.
Yeah.
And just because I didn't walk past it, just because I was like, oh, I would go this way, and then it took me so long just to find that one thing. And like I was kicking myself at it. I was like, oh, it was here all along, you know? And yeah, I just don't know why. Like, I feel like there's so few games which don't have maps like this. Oh yeah, about the healing pots thing. I think it's a really weird mechanic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, why is it not just like a checkpoint system? Like, or I don't know. It's just really peculiar where I have this finite resource, which, to be fair, it's only finite at the start of the game, really. And this determines whether or not I can heal. But it's also the collectible of the game. Also, smashing boxes, which is where some of them are. Like, so I have to smash boxes to find my healing item. As you pointed out, they don't obviously respawn. So I smash boxes once. I need to remember that I've already smashed that box, and there's nothing else that can possibly drop from a box. So it's really unsatisfying to break boxes in this game.
So funny you say that. The last seed that I had to find was in a box, and I had just ran through every area, assuming I'd already broken that box. Duh.
The characters and style of the game. I would probably say this is definitely like the highlight of the whole experience for me. It mainly comes from like the like juxtaposition between the like grim dark like atmosphere and setting that the game has, but then also like that completely contrasts with the way like how the characters talk and emote, and like kind of the almost like fairy tale or storybook way the characters are designed and like kind of talk to each other. And I think it works very well in just making the game really charming and immediately very likable, and does go a long way in like keeping your attention. I think if it wasn't for the charm and the atmosphere of the game, I don't think I would have stuck with it and finished it out, to be fair. I think I would have given up probably just after the first boss.
I think like the character design's really, really cool and really nice. And yeah, like there is like a fairy tale element to it. But other than the character design, I feel like everything else is really like middle of the road. Like I think the world design is very like paint by numbers. Like, you know, like you've got like your Dark Souls area, which is kind of gothic, more kind of castle stuff. Like then you've got like, you know, the woods and then the haunted manor, and I just like at no point did I really kind of go like, oh wow, look how cool that is. I just kind of looked like, okay, this is just generic, like just literally just generic levels. But again, like I only got halfway through, so maybe it does get some of the level designs and world designs to get a bit more fantasyful.
Not really.
No,
like
probably not.
the most unique thing is like the door stuff, right? Like, because that's, which is fine. Like that's the whole point. But no, you're absolutely right, Hans. Like it is by numbers. You have your ice level, you have your castle level, you have your forest level.
Well,
You have your enchanted
really
forest
have an ice
level.
level. You just have a castle level.
What was
Yeah,
the
but there's like
mountain
an
bit not
ice-
like icy. Yeah.
Yeah, there's like an ice area. Like, there is no desert level, to my knowledge, which I guess is the one that's missing.
There's a giant factory. That was a bit weird.
Oh yeah, at least that's cool. You know,
Yeah.
we'll give it that.
But no, like I get like the design of places. I think was probably a bit uninspired, but I just think from like just looking at the game, like the way it's designed and how it looks, it's very. It almost looks like it's going to be very stereotypically like, oh, dark, grim fantasy, everything's so bleak and oh. But then I think it completely like flips that on its head with like the way the characters talk and the way like the way they are like characterized and the way they're talking to each other and how they kind of just treat the whole thing as like, oh, it's a job. Like we are just admin birds. I just think that aspect of it is very charming. I get, yes, the design of the areas, I think, and just the overall look of the game, I think, is a bit uninspired. But just the tonal shift that you just kind of wouldn't get just from looking at like screenshots and stuff, I think it was an unexpected surprise.
Like I think like I there was moments of that for me, like whenever, you know, you're sitting on the park bench with Pothead and he offers you some soup from his head, like that was quite charming. But again, I just, for the most part, I definitely just kind of thought it was just kind of like,
I do think
it's very,
like the hub of the charm is in an area that you didn't get to, which is like the town bit where like all the NPCs kind of gather after you finish their area. Like Pothead turns up there, and then a bard turns up there, and you can listen to the bard write a song about you. And one of the Frog King's minions turns up there, and he like dons a new helmet because he's no longer a minion of the Frog King. And then
like for
there's,
me, like I don't know, like I just like,
But that's like characters, though, right? Like that's that, which I think is good. But I think the Hans makes like, I think his point is still valid, where it's just like the areas themselves are.
yeah,
Whatever.
like I say, even like the character interactions, like I know what you're saying, like it's like, oh, it's like reading a fairy tale book, but I think like for me, I think this game suffered a wee bit because I've just recently finished playing Psychonauts, which I feel like the writing and the comedy and stuff and like the charm in that is through the fucking roof. And then I've kind of played this game, and I think it's going to take a lot for any game to kind of stand up to that. Like if I think maybe if I hadn't played Psychonauts, yeah, maybe I would find this a bit more charming. But coming from so closely after that, yeah, it just feels underwhelming.
Yeah, I get that. Like, I definitely think all in all, like the characters and style, I think it's a pretty mixed bag. Like, I do think, like some of the just generic enemies, I think are very, very uninspired. Like some of those, like, and you do see them a lot is the issue. Like you see the same enemy pretty much throughout the entire game. I
Yeah,
think-
like
Yeah, it's
Oh,
a shame it's not
wow.
like per zone,
yeah.
right? I should
Like
realize
they introduce new ones in each zone.
They do,
but there
yes.
is like these still like generic fodder enemies you probably face the most of. They're the same ones you fought in like the very first area.
oh wow, a big carnivorous plant that can only like reach out and try and attack me. Where have I seen this before? Like I think that's kind of the thing as well. Like the enemies are not just uninspired; they are literally. They're not just uninspired in terms of the game; they are uninspired in terms of video games in general. Like that plant is just straight out a Zelda monster. Like again, it ties into. But I think this is where I think the bosses stand out. It's like whereas your generic enemies, your day-to-day enemies, are so, like underwhelming. I feel like the design of the bosses and stuff, they're really cool and feel quite fresh and unique. Like the pot, like the Witch of the Urn. Like, I think it's really dumb the fact she just goes inside this urn, even though she's like 3 or 4 sizes too big for it. The Lord of Doors, Doormaster.
Yeah, Lord of Doors.
Lord of Doors, again, like, he's kind of like a Harlequin / jester, like, design. But again, it's quite unique, especially in like compared to the other characters in the game. Again, just an example of how the bosses are the best bit. IY.
Yeah, anything else? There's probably not a lot of character stuff to kind of chat. Like, what did you guys think of like just the story in general? Like the overarching story.
Again, fine.
I really liked it. I thought the idea of the Lord of Doors sealing death behind the door so he wouldn't die and like would have to like pass it on to the next Lord of Doors was interesting. And then like you delve into his past and how like sad it is and how he like becomes who he is. I think it's really well done. It's a very like slow burn, and then it's like you find out more at the castle, and then it's like death tells you stuff, and then you end up finding out all the stuff at the end of the game. Yeah, I really like the story.
I think the story was. I think the story's good. I just wish it wasn't just let's find all the Dragon Balls. I'm just really tired of that.
Need more Yakuza-esque stories. That's what we need.
Yeah. And that's my only real qualm. And again, this all boils down to like the same like gameplay issues as well. Like it feels like they just did what they had to do. Like make 3 main dungeons, kill the bosses, get their thing, take it back to the middle. Like, but the actual story though, like the overarching thing, I thought was kind of cool. Like get these birds to work for you, so you don't have to collect all the souls anymore, but then get betrayed, and then like I think that's actually fine. And like it's just the classic story of like dude wants to be immortal, right? It's pretty classic, but like it's good. I think it's.
It also has a really sad side story with the gravekeeper. He's just chilling in the graveyard and he can't die.
Hey man, I tried to help him
until post game. Where he's a boss fight in the post game.
But yeah, there's only one point I want to make regarding like the style of the game.
Yeah, go for it.
I think the music is really great in this game.
Yeah, I would tend to agree.
I came back to this game I actually looked it up there. I think the song is called, it's the name of the area, the Old Watchtowers, and I think the music fits in real nice with the game. That's all I really want to say. Like, I think great music.
I didn't really notice the music.
That's a good thing, right?
Which is kind of down the middle then, so it's like, yeah, okay, so it wasn't terrible, but then I'm also like, it did make me go like, oh, fuck yeah, turn that jam up.
Like, it's particularly, I think, during, like I think Hans and I were called them, like, the gauntlet sections, where, like, you're kind of going, like, through not necessarily narrow corridors, but you're kind of funneling through an area, like, and there is pretty much just consistent effects happening. Yeah. I feel like those bits, the music is very good because it's very like triumphant and like, yeah, I'm battling through, and like the music does do a good job of like, yeah, let's fucking keep going, let's fucking kill people. I think those bits especially were probably where the music really stood out to me. I think especially the final one where you're like on like the ramparts of a castle, like kind of fighting through, is definitely where I felt the music kind of shone through. So the final category. How does an indie game stand out these days in 2021? So, in the early 360 days, like high quality indie games were pretty far and pretty few and far between, and it meant that it was never really hard to find the one that like everyone was talking about, or like what the wider gaming community was like, oh yeah, this is like a really big thing. So like it's why the likes of Bastion, Geometry Wars, Castle Crashers were all highlights in a pool of like pretty mediocre other games. But as like the medium has evolved and we've gotten to the point where the bar for most indie games is pretty high right now, and like most are reaching a larger audience because of services like Game Pass, and they're always getting a much bigger showing because they're constantly being shown off at like Nintendo Directs and the Xbox showcases and Sony State of Plays. So when there's so many high quality indie games, and I think Death's Door kind of falls into this category, they're so visible, they're so readily available. Like, what does an indie game need to do these days to stand out and like rise above the crowd that is already like so tightly packed with high quality indie games? Like, what does it need to do to catch your eye personally, and like what do you think it needs to do in a wider scale to reach a wider audience, to be like, yeah, in this, like you see it all the time and stuff like Nintendo Directs and the Xbox E3 showcases and things like that, where it's like, here's a montage of like 12 indie games. Like, what does it need to do in like that montage to be the one that stands out for people?
So I said I saw some clips of this game.
Mm-hmm.
The one clip I saw was the fact you can cut a sign in half and read both halves of the sign, and it's cut in half in the text box. And that was like, you know what? That's hilarious. And it made me look at more stuff with the game, and I was like, you know what? I'll not go any further because I want to play this.
I can't remember. It might actually be Pokemon, but there was definitely a game fairly recently, like in the last couple of years, that if you read the sign from the back, it goes, you can't read the sign from this side. What are you doing?
But like, just that.
For some reason, I think it's Pokemon.
Just that.
So pretty much, you guys are saying that for you to recognize an indie game,
Good
it needs to be
sign
witty.
mechanics.
It's just like, it's such a unique thing because I don't think I've ever seen a game do that before. Like, read the same sign but in two halves, cut in a text box. I just thought that was genius. And why, like, if that's the kind of like humor they're going to go for, surely this is going to be an interesting game. So that, I think they need to have like wee moments like that, like eye-catching moments, or be stream friendly, because apparently that's what games need to be these days.
Yeah. Because like it was something that really occurred to me. It was like, obviously when Bastion came out and Supergiant kind of became this big name in like indie game development, they weren't massive things. Like the Xbox Live Arcade wasn't pumping out like a new really big game like every week. Like they almost had like the summer, like they had the summer of arcade stuff that they did, and like that's kind of when they funneled all the big Xbox Live Arcade releases, and Bastion was one of them. And then like maybe think of like, if Hades didn't have like the Supergiant name behind it and it was a completely different studio making pretty much the exact same game, like would it stand out in a crowd of like those like indie game montages you would see at E3 or something? Like would it stand out? Because I think there is such a high quality these days, and it used to be like, oh, that was like games would stand out because it's a super like eye-catching art style, but that's not that difficult to achieve anymore, and like that sort of thing is losing its effect. So it's just interesting to see, like, is there an indie game out there that no one's really, like, that's absolutely fucking baller, but no one's really talked about it or played it because it just didn't do the right thing to stand out from the crowd?
But like for a lot of indie games and stuff, they, like when they're doing those like, oh, here's our indie showcase, just because it looks visually nice does not mean it will play well. And like, I feel like for a game, for me to stand out, what I look for is not how sparkly it looks. It's like I wanted to do something new, or like do a clever twist on something that's already been established. Because I feel like indie gaming is the place where you try new things and play new things, and like I look at, for example, like you guys, Nick, you played 12 minutes. Yeah. That's quite a unique game. Like, yeah, alright, so it's like a point and click game, but the concept of, You know, it's taken a concept. It's pretty much mixed a point and click adventure with like the time mechanics of maybe like a Legend of Zelda Majora's
You
Mask.
say that, but I feel like I've played a lot of time loop games in the last couple of months.
Yeah, but then I think it's like last couple of months. Like, when's the last time before that you played a time loop game?
Ghost Trick.
Last year with Outer Wilds, probably.
Like, there will always kind of be those phases of things, like,
Yeah.
because another thing, like Outer Wilds was probably like, it was an indie game and it did the time stuff really, really well, and other indie games were like, maybe we could give that a go. You know, I like when you say Bastion. The way I think of Bastion and why it did so well is because I think like for Bastion, it was just kind of how like the game like fell in as you played it, like the game world fell in as you played it. There's so many things about Bastion that made it so good.
Well, yeah, it was
the
narrator
it was
as well.
like the
Thing as
presentation
well.
of Bastion definitely like was
Yeah.
the first like eye-catching thing and like the thing that got your attention, and then obviously like that's what I'm talking about. Like that was the thing that got your attention, and then like the game itself followed up on that when it actually released.
I just like for me, I want them to like I want indie games to be something new and like for it to be the experiment ground for like cool ideas. I don't like indie games that are just like, oh well, we don't have a big budget, but we're just going to make this game anyway, but on a smaller scale. I hate when indie games do that.
I don't think there's anything wrong with making or with going with the formula that has already been proven.
It'll sell units. Do you know what I mean? But
my very blunt answer to Nick with his question of, well, what gets you to notice a game, an indie game specifically? Literally for me, it's like
Car building roguelike.
yeah. But well, this is the
Deck
thing.
building roguelike.
Well, this is the thing, right? Is like you guys always jump in and be like, oh, there's like a new one, but the thing I already know about it, and that's because of content creators, right? And like for me personally, that's how I get my information. Is like there's like a couple of content creators who like I don't actually follow, but like their videos keep getting recommended to me, and they focus a lot on the indie scene. So that's why I would know more about it. In terms of just like how to get it out there. In terms of like staying power though, like I don't like at the end of this recording, I will happily recommend this game. Right? For as critical as I've been, I will happily recommend this game. Because I think there's nothing wrong with a perfectly good game. You know? Like, we're not all gamers like you, Nick, with your gamer fuel, you know? With some of us...
I don't have gamer fuel.
Yeah,
Sneak is not specifically directed at gamers.
Is it for, like, creative people or something?
Yeah, I think it is more designed at, like,
influencers.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like sometimes, like if I look back, my 3D platformer of choice back then was Croc. That was my game. Back in the day.
I can't believe we've now went 2 game clubs in a row mentioning Croc.
Yeah, hell yeah, man, because it's a fucking great game, right? But for someone else, right? This, like their first
could have been Crash
platformer.
Bandicoot, it could have been Spyro. Yeah.
Yeah, their first 3D platformer. It's gonna be like Mario Odyssey. Right, and it's obviously a way better, but it's not really, guys. Just to let you know. But like, there's
I'm gonna break it down for you. Fundamentally, on a completely objective level, Super Mario Odyssey is a better 3D platformer than Croc.
What about Croc 2 though? Was there a Croc 2? I think there was a Croc 2.
There was probably a Croc 2.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like I don't think there's anything wrong with like having a game, like just do what is the current gen. I don't think there's an issue with that. But yeah, if you do want like a big standout thing, it really needs to like. I actually think like having a pretty game helps, right? Because that's the first thing we see in a trailer, right?
Yeah.
Like you said with like the Bastion stuff, it's like it looks cool, but there's also the sound part of it. I think those two are like really big deals.
Can I?
My thing about that is like it's getting like we were at a point where like the big way to stand out that way was to have like look at this game and it's super high quality like pixel art graphics, and it's trying to figure out like where does that go from here, because I feel like we've seen so many of those now that they're not like it doesn't have the same effect. It's like what is the next like eye-catching art style that immediately stands out to people, because I felt like for definitely like 3 or 4 years every other indie game was like, oh, look at our super high quality 2D graphics.
Yeah, no, that is very true. I got really sick of it.
Yeah. Like, sometimes that was fine. Like, a game like Carrion that came out, I think, late last year. Like, that was really, like, it did something really cool with its 2D graphics because it just made that monster look so fucking gross with the way it moved in 2D. And, like, you probably wouldn't achieve the same thing without it looking really janky in 3D. But yeah, it's trying to find, like, because I feel like every art style now has been done so well, it's trying to find, like, the new thing that hasn't, that really catches someone's eye. Sorry, Alex, you were going to say something.
I was just going to say, you know what I'm really sick of seeing at this stage? Pixel art games.
Yeah.
I don't know what has happened over the last few years, but there are so many games.
I don't think
It's just
I
like-
don't think there's any more or less than there used to be. I think it's just the art style has been done to death.
Yeah.
I almost feel like the next wave of art style is going to be games that look like PlayStation 1 games. Like in the way that like Valheim does. Is I feel like that's what we're going towards, is history is just repeating itself.
Like fashion.
Yeah. Like everyone went through everything needs to look like a really high quality SNES game. Now everything's going to look like a really high quality PS1 game.
Can't wait for them to remaster Croc then.
So personally, I think there is highs and lows to Death's Door. I definitely think it skirts more towards lows for like the first 2/3 of the game. But if you do stick with it, it will get somewhere eventually, and it makes it worth playing, I would say, just about. My only issue is I do think there are games that will do this thing just better. And I think that is, if you're looking for the best of the best, this isn't it. But if you're looking something to scratch that itch, I think you'll find it here. Hans.
I think there are some very, very big highs in Death's Door. But those highs, everything in between them is either fine, boring, or frustrating. Probably would not recommend.
Alex.
I would say, while it does have its low points, I don't think the lows are like, extreme. They're not bad. It's just they're a bit dull. The boss fights are interesting. The story is quite interesting. Though I will say, if you're going to go for the true ending, look it up because it's probably not worth going through all that time finding everything at the end of the game. But yeah, I would recommend this game. It's a good game. It's not great. It's good.
Oh,
You guys talk about all these highs and lows, but I think it's okay all the way through. It is perfectly okay.
It's a 5 out of 10.
I give it a 6. Yeah, the music gives me a 6. Maybe a 6 and a bit. But that's the thing, though.
So it's a high, you're saying?
That's not written. If you got 60 out of 100 in your test, Nick, would you feel like, I got a high mark?
Yeah, I would. Because I'm an underachiever.
But yeah, like I'd recommend this. I think it's again fine. Like, and there's nothing wrong with being fine.
I feel like you're projecting here, Aoi.
I could be, yes.
The final question I do actually want to ask, Alex, what prompted you to 100% it?
I don't know. I just thought... I just have, sometimes I just get that feeling with games. Where I just go...
Alex is like the collector.
Yeah, I know. Alex is doing
Fucking loves them Assassin's
with his
Creed
Final
flags.
Fantasy and his Final Fantasy run
His
through.
nothings.
You're pretty much doing everything. But I know, it was when you sent that picture in, you said, yeah, I was 100% of the games. I would wondered what prompt, because playing through it myself, nothing prompted me to be I should 100% this.
I don't know what it is, but sometimes when I'm playing a game, I just get a feeling, you know what, I'll 100% this, and I don't know why. It's all I obviously enjoyed the game if I 100% did it, so I don't.
Sorry, no, it was just it had been on my mind.
No, I'm weird.
Come show, that's it.
There's just some games I will not even attempt 100%. I love them to bits, like Yakuza. I love Yakuza to bits. I would not 100% the Yakuza game.
Yeah, that'd be some tough going.
So overall, Death's Door, fine,
Thumbs up.
and it's okay to be fine.
It took us an
according
hour.
to
It took
DIY.
us an hour and a half for me to say
get
it's
through
fine.
Fine.
Yep.
But before we wrap it up for the evening, Hans, it is your turn to pick a game. So, what are we playing in October?
Nick, I did not have a game picked right up until we had our conversation the other day.
Oh, it is the game God damn it.
And so technically you could say that not only did you pick Alex's game this time around, you technically picked this game too.
God, Nick's
So if
getting 3 goes in a row. What is this?
Yeah,
I'm
so
gonna have to pick iWise's fucking game next, aren't I?
so where you may not be getting to pick games for Alex's A to Z, there's another advertisement for you there.
Nice
Alex.
plug.
You are absolutely running riot and picking games for Game Club. So, for the month of October, we are not playing a spooky game, believe it or not. Because, you know, I like
Is
to
that
keep all
that's
that
a first in a while, isn't it?
Yeah, usually we do. But this time, we are playing one of my favorite games of all time. L.A. Noire.
Oh, he
it is
is
actually
picking
Eleanor.
Eleanor. Oh,
Wow.
okay. Wait, there was speculation about this.
Wait, you told me you didn't think myself and I would like it.
I didn't think you did like this
I've
game.
finished it.
Yeah, you can finish a game you don't like.
Yeah, like Death's Door.
Yeah, like that. Because I know it's a very divisive game. A lot of people were expecting it to be GTA, just set in the 50s, and it very much was not that. So yeah, I know it's a very divisive game, but it is 100% one of my favorite games I've ever played. So, just like Ghostbusters.
I can't take it seriously when you say one of your favorite game when Ghostbusters is in the same bloody.
Dude, Ghostbusters
Alright.
is dope.
Ghostbusters is not good. You shut up, Hans.
Join us. I'm going to talk over this conversation while they argue. Join us in October where we play L.A. Noire. But for now, it's goodbye from Hans.
Go play Ghostbusters as well.
No. It's a goodbye from Alex.
You know what, Hans? Screw you. Ghostbusters sucks.
And it's a goodbye from Iowa.
How am I going to get Croc into the conversation next time?
It's a goodbye from myself. See you next time.